We can add a few more.
But this is for inspection.
As long as it's away from the camera.
Good evening, everybody. I hope you can all hear me. You don't have mics set up, but I appreciate your time for coming out tonight. My name is Ivan Gall. I'm the director of the Water Resources Department. I've been with the agency about 25 some years. Worked in a number of capacities, different parts around the state. Doug and our other staff tonight have put a lot of time into starting some outreach around backflow prevention or back siphon prevention devices on groundwater wells. So Doug's got a presentation fired up tonight for you. We'll be available afterwards to answer questions. There's a lot of good information. I want to thank the vendors that came out tonight with your equipment. Very educational for me as well to see this stuff, get your hands on it directly. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Doug, and again, appreciate you all coming out.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for taking the time to come out and meet with us tonight. First thing I'd like to do is to have our staff who are in the room raise their hands. Some of you have been meeting with them already, but if you look behind you, there's Tessa, and there's Sean, and there's Charlotte, and there's Ross, and there's Chris, and Ivan just introduced himself. I'm Doug Woodcock with the department, deputy to the director. Ivan introduced himself as being here for, what'd you say, 26 years?
25 and
something like that. I was laughing because today is my 34th anniversary with Water Resources Department. That was pointed out to me this morning. Anyway, with that, we're going to talk about backflow prevention tonight, and I want to start off just by acknowledging I am not an irrigation specialist expert by any means. We are not irrigation specialists, but we have some irrigation specialists with us tonight. And actually, let's introduce a few people here. Just raise hands here. So we've got over here, I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name, Ron and
Malcolm.
Malcolm, thank you very much. And they've got one of the tables back here, and the other gentleman at the other table, where are you? You're in here. So there you are. You introduce yourself.
Richard Scott with Elmer's Irrigation.
Yeah, Richard Scott with Elmer's Irrigation. So they're equipment specialists here, and I encourage you to reach out to them, talk to them about the various components that we're going to talk about tonight. Let's see, what else should I do as an intro here? I think I will go ahead and advance. I don't have a lot of slides for you tonight, but my plan is that when we're done, and we've got our staff here, We want to stick around and do some question answer right here in this forum. And then if you still have questions and you don't want to talk here in the group, we're going to go ahead and set up at these tables. And you can come back and we can do some one-on-one after you've had a chance to listen to this and digest some of the information here. So with that, we're going to figure out how to advance. Look at that. So why are we here? This is the Walnut. You're all familiar with this, Lower Umatilla Basin groundwater management area. There is a very, very bad groundwater contamination issue here, nitrate problems across the Walnut. The governor has directed the state agencies to reduce nitrate contamination in the Lower Umatilla Basin. And so DEQ, ODA, Water Resources Department, Oregon Health Authority, we're all working together and we're all working on the Walnut issue. We raised the issue of backflow prevention because wells that are hooked up to a chemigation system where you're actually injecting chemicals into your irrigation line and applying that as you irrigate has the potential of drawing those chemicals down the well when that well gets shut off. And so there is a requirement that backflow prevention equipment be installed on the irrigation system to prevent that unintended movement of water back down the well. Now I'll say a little something right here. We had a gentleman and his son come in a little earlier and say, I irrigate from my domestic well and I don't chemigate. I don't inject any chemicals into my irrigation line. Do I need backflow prevention? The answer is no, you don't. So if you're not chemigating, then this equipment is not necessary. So I just want to get that out there right now. He thanked us, took a cookie and left. So as I pointed out, backflow devices are required on chemigation systems. And lastly, while we're here, we want to help you navigate the rules. Because I don't want anybody to have to sit down and decipher the Oregon Water Resources Department backflow device rules and try to understand them cold, because they can be complicated. So with that, I want to define some terms for us here. You'll hear me bounce back and forth using the term chemigation and fertigation. Fertigation is kind of a subset of chemigation. Chemigation is injecting chemicals into your irrigation system. And fertigation is just kind of a more specialized, it's where you're injecting fertilizers into your irrigation main line. I use them somewhat interchangeably, but chemigation is the more common term that I would use. So don't get hung up on the words too much there. Backflow. So backflow is, that unintended flow of water upstream through your irrigation system. And so possible issues, I'm sorry, I'll go over here. Back siphonage. So that's where you actually, a siphon actually gets set up and it draws that water backwards in the irrigation system and then back down into the well itself. And there's equipment to help prevent that. And then back pressure. You could look at an elevation system where you've got more pressure at the end of your irrigation system than at your well, and it's pushing that water in the wrong direction. Touch just a little bit on the law. So these rules have been on the books since the mid-1990s. And a lot of people have this equipment on their wells, and many don't. We've taken some phone calls of late that indicate that some folks aren't aware of backflow prevention and don't have this equipment. So this is why we're here. We just want to be able to talk you through what the equipment is and why it's necessary. And so I'll just touch on first on the left there, Oregon Administrative Rule just says back siphon prevention devices shall be installed on any irrigation system connected to a groundwater source when chemicals or fertilizers are applied through the system. And that rule is basically spelling out the authority that is provided under the revised statutes. And those are just general standards for the enforcement and inspection of back siphon prevention devices. These rules, by the way, were modeled after the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, Rodenticide Act. Some may have heard of it, referred to as FIFRA. And like I mentioned, these rules have been in place since the mid-90s. This is a very, very simplified system. Many of the irrigation systems that are out there are much more complicated than this, but we're going to keep it simple now. And I'm going to start downstream. So here's the pump right here. Water is flowing this direction. So if I'm starting downstream, down at this end here, the first thing we have is an injection line check valve. That check valve is there to prevent the unintended movement of fluid one way or the other. So you don't want your irrigation water flowing up in through your injection pump and to your chemical tank. So that check valve prevents that movement of that fluid, that water, and also prevents the unintended discharge of this chemical water in the event there is a pump shutdown. You don't have that drainage from the chemigation or the injection pump into the irrigation main line. And this has to be downstream of the next item, which is the check valve. Oh, first, excuse me, I want to point out that up here on the with the injection pump, that needs to be interlocked. And here we say it's interlocked to the pump. So in the event that the pump, your groundwater supply, shuts down abruptly, this automatically turns off. It automatically, that interlock automatically shuts off that pump and prevents that continued injection of water into the irrigation main line when you don't want it. More complicated systems where you've got many wells, they're all manifolded together, and then they all go out to multiple center pivots. This may be a little different configuration than we've drawn here. Again, this is a simplified diagram to explain the different components of back siphon prevention. The next item upstream is the check valve. This just needs to be, this is for irrigation systems with a main line of 4 inches or greater. There's 2 different standards here. This is for the larger system. So you have a check valve. It need only be a single check valve, but it needs to be corrosion resistant. It needs to be mechanical. It cannot be an electric system. This mechanical system is spring loaded. So when the pressure kicks up from the pump, the check valve opens up and the water flows out to the irrigation system. When the pressure is reduced, when that pump shuts down, that check valve closes and prevents any of this water that has been injected with fertilizers or chemicals, prevents it from flowing towards the pump. In between the pump and the check valve, you have some more equipment here. There's an air vacuum relief valve. And so when the pump shuts down and there's a draw of fluid back to the well, this prevents that siphon from setting up. That's your air vacuum relief. Prevents that vacuum from setting up. There's an inspection port also. And some of you, if you had a chance to meet with the vendors back there, they've got some equipment that shows where that inspection port sits. That inspection port and air vacuum relief sits directly above the automatic low pressure drain. Automatic low pressure drain is a valve that under pressure closes so that the water flows through the system. And when the pressure is reduced, that valve opens up and allows the incidental water that is pooled up here, because the pump is shut off, the valve is closed, there's still fluid in here, it's going to drain that fluid away before it flows back down the well. Again, all of this is intended to prevent that contaminated or that potentially contaminated water from flowing back down into the well. This automatic low pressure drain has a hose on it. That hose is supposed to run a minimum of 20 feet downhill away from your well, and it needs to have an air gap at the end so that there's no opportunity for, if a vacuum is set up, there's no opportunity for this hose to act as a conduit for fluid to be drawn back up into the well. I think that does it for this. I'm going to stop there and ask if anybody has a question before I show the next size of these. Okay. So this is a system set up for 4 inches or larger. This is the requirement, I'm sorry, it's a little bit small. This is the requirement for irrigation systems with a main line of less than 4 inches. All of the same components. Injection line, check valve, interlock to your pump. You've got your drain, your low pressure drain, and hose. But here, rather than a single check valve, the requirement is a double check valve called a reduced pressure assembly, an RP assembly. So it's just a little bit different to the system, but all of the same essential components are in it. Here's just a couple of pictures of what you've seen back at the vendors here. This is a Fresno brand over here. It's just a single check valve that has been inserted into the main line, and you can see it's got the air vacuum relief. And here's our low pressure drain with a hose heading off. On this side, we've got this happens to be a Pierce brand system, like you see on the back table there. We really like these because they're, almost all of the components are in one device. You've got your air vacuum relief. You pop off that lock on top. You've got your inspection port directly over your low pressure drain right here. You can put a pressure gauge on if you need to right there. And you've got your check valve here. So it's just all in one system, and we approve of that design. Again, set components, air vacuum, got our check valves, got our low pressure drain here, and your injection line valves that I was pointing out. This picture didn't come through quite like I had hoped, but this is a picture of the low pressure drain. It's got a couple of problems with it. One, there's no hose. You should have a hose that discharges that fluid away from your well. And secondly, you can't quite see it, but right on top of this nipple here, right on top, there's a handle. It's a shutoff handle. And that's a requirement for the low pressure drain. You cannot have a shutoff anywhere along that line. Not on the valve itself, not anywhere along that discharge line. So I want to talk just a moment here about our compliance inspections. As part of our effort, as part of Water Resources Department's effort to work on nitrate reduction in the lower Umatilla Basin, we are going to be out meeting with people and inspecting to make sure that where chemigation is taking place, the proper equipment is in place. And so we'll be out looking at just the status of the chemigation. Is chemigation occurring or not? What equipment is there? Backflow system setup. And we'll be looking at backflow and relative to where it is relative to your pump also. So we just want to make sure that we've got all of the right equipment in the right place, and that equipment would be effective in preventing backflow down the well. On the compliance piece, we go out there and there's compliance, if you've got all the equipment in place, everything looks good, no further action. Everything stops right there. When we get out and we see that the equipment is not there or it's not in proper working order, we're going to try to meet with the owner, the operator, and let them know that that equipment needs to be replaced or installed. If there is a refusal or there just is a lack of compliance, we will pursue enforcement on this. And that just would be a notice of violation and a notice of assessment, which is basically leads to civil penalties. We don't want to go there. We're hoping that when we get out there and meet with the landowner and they recognize that they don't have the appropriate equipment there, that that equipment is going to be installed. One other thing, an important point. The issue, the way that the rules are structured, if you are chemigating and you don't have the proper back siphon prevention equipment in place, then you are out of compliance. To be in compliance, you disconnect the chemigation. You just stop fertilizing through your system at that point. And then that buys time for the landowner to get, or the operator, to get the appropriate equipment in place. If you disconnect, if we come out and we say you don't have the equipment in place, would you please disconnect your chemigation, and you do, we're done. Don't hook it back up until you get this stuff in place, but that gives you the opportunity to get one of those Pierce devices installed and make sure that you've got the proper equipment there for that back siphon prevention. So that's, I believe, how our staff will address this when they see that you don't have the right equipment or the landowner doesn't have the right equipment. They'll ask you just to stop chemigating. And then, as far as we're concerned, you're in compliance. I want to share with you just a few resources. I hope you noticed that on the table when you first came in, we had some copies of some documents here. The first one I have listed up there, chemigation in the Pacific Northwest. There is a lot of good information in this document. It's more than just what the back siphon prevention equipment is, but it also talks about the appropriate ways to calculate your chemigation so you're getting the right application of chemicals in place. The gentleman that wrote this, the lead author, happened to be on the Rules Advisory Committee in the mid-90s when the Oregon Water Resources Department back siphon prevention rules were adopted. So really a lot of help in developing those rules from Mr. Turner. We've got another document here, guidelines to chemigation. So another document with a lot of good information in it. And then lastly, we also made copies of the rules if anybody wants to sit down and spend some time looking to see what the requirements are. So with that, I think let's take some questions. I encourage staff to help me out here as we get questions. And like I said, we'll take any questions that we have here. And if we want to go ahead and head back to a table afterwards, we're going to hang around and eat cookies. And we'll continue to be here for you to address your questions. So with that, how can I help you? Sir?
So in your large system, what constitutes an inspection?
In the large system, as we have it described here, go back to the picture here. The inspection port is required so you can make sure that you don't have incidental fluids and that there's proper drainage here. So it's got to be accessed above that low pressure drain.
So is a 1-inch port, a height port sufficient, or a 2-inch, or does it have to be
4.
disconnect, or what constitutes an inspection port?
It's a minimum of a 4-inch access port.
Unless written approval happens.
I'm sorry?
Unless it has written approval from the department.
Oh, that's something else I didn't point out. I did mention that some of these irrigation systems can be pretty complicated, and you can't just get a one-size-fits-all to address all of the backflow prevention requirements. So the director of the department can approve alternate systems, but it requires that you actually reach out to the department and you actually get that approval. So I think, Sean, correct me, it's got to be in writing?
Yeah,
The
it
request
says
in
written
writing?
approval by
Okay.
the department.
If you're just going to grab one of those Pierce systems like our vendor friends have here, and those are going to be installed, those are going to be approved. That's not a problem. If you're not going to go that route, if you're going to do something in the alternative, contact the department. I don't want you to be making a big investment in equipment and find out that it's not really meeting the standard. So please reach out to us. Did you guys bring business cards?
Yes.
Yeah. Not you guys, these guys. Reach out to them. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Why do you have an automatic low pressure drain on that picture there?
So this is, we have an automatic low pressure drain here, and that is to essentially eliminate any incidental fluids that are in the pipe behind the check valve.
But it's gonna go down the well.
The incidental fluids would go down the well?
Yeah.
Yes, they would.
So why do you have a drain?
You have a drain there because this is potentially contaminated water that you have here. Some water can get past this check valve.
But when the turbine shuts off, there's nothing to stop that water from going back down the well.
When the turbine shuts off, you're going to get flow back down the well. That is correct. But there's going to be some of this. This is going to shut off. There's going to be some of this that's going to be captured by this drain and shunted away. So that's going to be fluid. that
We're
does
talking
not go down
cups.
that well. I'm sorry?
We're probably talking cups.
Probably cups.
You know how many of those I've seen that have been plugged?
No, how many?
Almost all of them. Because they leak, they don't work. So, if you put a cup in for a Fresno check valve up front, all I would have to do is roll a 4-inch coupler on it and put an air vent on it.
So you're saying you don't need the automatic low pressure drain. You just have this
Well, I guarantee you, once you guys check it, it's gonna get plugged.
in the, once you get the check in, the low pressure drain gets plugged. Low pressure drain is not to be plugged. You know, it's,
Yeah, it's not gonna sit there and leak all over their pump station.
this equipment is not a one and done. I think we agree with that. You know, you put this stuff in, it's gotta be maintained. It's gotta be inspected. You gotta check this stuff. Interesting, when we first started this started developing this outreach program, I reached out to some of the growers and said, hey, we're doing this. We're going to set this up. We're going to start inspecting these. And a couple of the guys, pretty good-sized growers locally, said, you're going to find that most people have these things in place. Some don't. But many of these are going to need to be replaced. They're going to need to be updated. And that kind of falls into your category, I think, that you're pointing out. And that is that this equipment can get installed, but it's got to be maintained. And so if you've got a plugged drain valve, then that's going to have to be replaced.
I think to this point, I think what you're trying to say is those are problematic because they collect all the rust out along the pipe.
Yeah.
And then that inhibits the correct operation.
Yeah. Automation.
They tend to leak constantly when the well's in operation, which is why you'll find that when we feed it. Probably just the same as you saw that there was a hand valve that was installed.
Yeah.
It's exactly they can be very problematic.
That's helpful.
Is it rust that typically clogs those?
Yes, rust, calcium, sands, rocks, rocks that come through your well, debris, all of it.
Can everybody hear that? Did you hear that okay? Okay. Just want to make sure. Yes, sir.
On the inspection part of it, is that something that you guys do, or is that going to be for contractors like water level measurement, whole thing?
You know, right now, the way that the rules that aren't in place say that the owner-operator is responsible for inspecting the equipment each year before chemigation begins. So the owner-operator takes a look at that, make sure that it's working. We will be out and inspecting as well. First, So we have looked at chemigation around the state in individual cases. Our biggest effort in chemigation was really down in southwest Oregon, where we had this huge bloom, no pun intended, huge bloom of cannabis that was, just really growing everywhere. And people were taking their domestic wells and injecting chemicals into the irrigation lines and fertilizing their crops with them. And so we were working with them to make sure that they had back siphon on those to protect that drinking water supply. We have not done the type of focused look at backflow prevention like we're telling you that we're doing today here in the lower Umatilla Basin. So we're going to be out, we're going to be looking at these. The first thing we're going to do is just make sure the equipment is in place. We will develop some sort of an inspection program down the road. But right now, this year, before the 2025 chemigation or irrigation season starts, if you're going to be chemigating, get the equipment inspected, get the equipment installed, make sure everything is functional for 2025. And we'll be reaching out to folks to come out and see if the equipment is in place. Yes, sir.
Do you have a list of either approved devices or specifications for your automatic low pressure drain? As far as how big it has to be, or, the pressure in which it seals, or in standard?
Sean, do you recall what the pressure says, or what the size?
It's a 1 PSI. It is when it needs a trigger, but in terms of the size, it just has a 3/4 inch diameter.
Okay, so 3/4 inch. I don't know that we have a list of manufacturers.
Yeah, there's several you can find online. They're about $20 to replace one of those. You can shop around at different ones. Or contact the ones that we have, like Pierce. They actually, on Pierce's website, had some of these.
Well, that's a helpful point. I'm glad you raised that about the low pressure drain, because it sounds like that can be problematic, and that's something that we can pay attention to when we come out and look at those things.
You're only requiring this on well, you're not requiring this on ditch.
That is correct.
What about sumps?
The rules that we're talking about are groundwater related. So if your sump is just a kind of an excavation in the earth that has groundwater that's seeping into the bottom of it, that would constitute a well. And so that would fall under this as well. I said well twice, didn't I?
So back, your inspection port, did it be a 4-inch
Yes.
coupler? And reduced down to a 2-inch air vent?
I think so.
Yeah, as long as you can see the check valve from the inspection port.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So it could be a Fresno or a Tuscan or check valve,
Another check valve?
wafer check.
Oh, waiver check. As long as it also has that air vacuum relief valve.
Well, yeah,
With it.
most of them have that. I mean, 90% of your wells already have a check, or 100% have a check valve, because number one, they're on multiple systems. And that farmer's gonna know if that check valve's not working, and he's losing water, he's not gonna like it. So he's gonna have that check valve inspected and shut off. When that turbine shuts down, all that air vent really does is release air back down into that turbine to let the water stream out. Subs are different. On a centrifugal system, you're not gonna find anybody that's gonna put a drain on the bottom, like on a sump or anything like that, or even on a 20-foot well, because they want it to keep prime. So and I'm just saying, once you guys inspect everything, and I already talked to you, there's no incentive to any farmer. It's not these guys didn't cause it, but now they've got to pay for it. And so there's no incentive, and once you guys leave, like I said, that drain's gonna get plugged. They just spent a bunch of money for someone to come out, weld a coupler on, and those Pierce irrigation valves, they wear out. They're very expensive, and they don't go up to 14 or 16 inch. So what do you do then?
Well, I would like to, in these situations that aren't straightforward, where you can't just buy something off the shelf, I want to work with you. I want to work with people who are knowledgeable about this and find the equipment that will be effective in preventing the backside development. Just what we can do that meets the intent of the rules, and we get those components on there, we'll be happy.
So you and your crew are going to go out there, well, and you're going to look at it.
We're going to hit as many as we can.
And you're going to let the farmer know, no, that needs a drain on, or that needs an inspection report. You're going to let them know what they need to do, if they need to do anything.
Yes.
Then they can go from there. It's decide if they just want to put a drain. Because all of them have waiver checks on them. And some do have their chem check. They're just not a very good, they're not as good as a waiver check or a clerical check.
Another question for you. So in the paperwork we received, there was a question about when the system, Backflow system was last tested. What is the test requirement? Is that different than just a regular inspection?
Right now, as the rules point out, I mentioned that the landowner operator responsible for inspecting and testing the device. So from what we have available to us right now, again, I'm not an expert on these things. Your inspection port allows you to get in there probably with a mirror. When I look at those up there, I have a hard time kind of seeing that check valve. But I think with a mirror and a flashlight, you could see that in fact the check valve is closed, and it looks like it appears to be in good repair. I think that constitutes inspection. And maybe you take a look at that low pressure drain or something like that. You're looking at the equipment, checking that you've got that interlock on your system.
This doesn't need to be a third party certified.
At this time, no. At this time, no.
What about, smaller diameter RPs have to be tested mechanically?
Smaller RPs do, and I know that municipal systems, when you're hooked up to a municipal system, you've got a landscape irrigation system, you have to have those things tested annually. Those are third-party certified. We do not have that. Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, we do not have a requirement for certified testing on the RPs.
All of the well inspectors get those, but we don't have it, no.
Yeah, all of our well inspectors are trained in inspecting those RPs. But yeah, that's a
I just
good
mean,
point.
like, if you had a 3-inch line, you had an RP on it, you don't have to have it tested by a backflow.
Yes, our rules do not require that to be. And, oh, sorry, Chris?
That's true, but I would note that the director can require that.
That is true. Yes. And I wanted to check in with this gentleman over here. You had your hand up for a moment.
My question was why we have to have a 4-inch drain spot on the bottom if you can get by with a 3/4-inch low pressure drain.
I think the 4-inch requirement for the inspection port allows you to be able to look at your check valve and make sure that your check valve is closed and in good repair here. I would look to some of our irrigation specialists here. Does that make sense?
I thought it was that big, so you could put your hand in and actually physically move it in and out, but
They want 4 inches on top for inspection, and only 3/4 inches on the bottom.
Yeah, 4-inch on top up here, and just a 3/4 down here. Any other questions?
Are there any changes? I mean, this is an old standard that we're just now getting around to enforcing. Is there anything as far as change coming down the pipe we should be aware of as we're evaluating our systems?
There is nothing in the works right now that I would point to that we see on the horizon. However, this is going to be very educational as we get out and visit all of these different farms and look at the different systems. Depending upon what we find, it could result in the department coming back and changing some of the rules to make things a little more clear. You asked about a third-party inspection program. Does that end up being in the works? I don't know.
Did it come to make it on this required design as a 20-foot green? Could be problematic in a lot of installations. You may not have elevation to get drainage slope. Realistically, having a sealed wellhead or having some kind of lack of continuity to the wellhead, might be a more realistic approach.
Yes, sir.
You said you're going to come inspect. Are you going to give the landowners advance notice? Are you going to call, or are you just going to show up on their property and they're going to see you out there and you pick up and then come up to you? Or?
We're going to make an attempt to meet, connect with the landowner before we come out. Because some of these systems, quite frankly, are complicated, and it would really help if we had somebody there to show us, here's my well, and these are the 3 pivots over there that are being serviced by this well, and it would just be a lot easier. Chris?
That's a really good question, and I know many of you have met Tessa when you came in, so we don't have everybody's contact information. We may have your address. We will make every attempt to make sure that you know that we are coming out to do this inspection. We can't promise every single person that we will make contact with you, because some people don't live on their property, or there's other issues that come up in trying to talk to people as we're going out there. And we have 730-ish of these to do this year, so we're going to make every attempt to connect with people who are out there, because we want to understand how your system works and make sure we're all on the same page. That is our intent, but we can't. We'll do our very best to make sure we do that. But there may be circumstances where we just have to go out and do an inspection.
Everyone hear that okay?
Yeah, I would just encourage, if you have not given your phone number, please do so. I've gotten a few of yours, and that's great. But like Chris said, we have no way of contacting you. Or if you know of some friends that are not here that might want to contact, please have to contact our office with their most recent contact information, because some of the water rights are associated about 30, 40 years ago. They may have moved on. And if you see a white truck,
Don't shoot.
don't shoot.
Can we call you guys so you guys can meet
Yes,
with us?
absolutely, yeah. I'm happy to do that, yeah.
Yes, we do.
It's just my name on it. Let me bring that.
Other questions?
So let me show you guys my system before I do something to it, and then
Any of our irrigation specialists, engineers, etc., want to add anything that they have missed? Folks think that
But this is what we're talking about.
there's something folks here need to hear that we haven't talked about tonight?
Check before you get it.
Here's my name.
How long does it take if you order something like that? How long does it take to get that to stock or here's one?
Quickly,
there's stock.
usually stock,
Just does Elmer's.
and Elmer's does too.
So the question was, how long does it take to get something if you were to order a Pierce model, for instance? And the answer was they're in stock. It's not going to take long. Okay, everybody. Thank you for coming out. Really appreciate it. And do reach out to us if you have any other questions. Happy to answer. We'd like to make appointments to come out and check out your equipment. And we're going to go ahead and set up in back here. And if you want to hang around and come talk to us, have a cookie, please do.
There's plenty of cookies left, so please take some home if you can.